We bought the cheapest Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio in the UK. Is it a hidden gem or a costly mistake? Let's find out. The Quadrifoglio is pure Italian design language. With its sculpted curves, aggressive stance, and signature V-shaped grille, it looks ready to pounce even when it's standing still. The carbon fibre accents hint at its performance pedigree, while the iconic four-leaf clover badge marks it as something truly special. Its elegance, muscle, and racing heritage, all in one breathtaking form. When I first heard the name Quadrifoglio, I naturally assumed it was a type of cheese pizza that you get in an Italian restaurant, but it turns out it's actually something quite a bit tastier. The four-leaf clover is the symbol that Alfa Romeo have put on their race cars from way back when to wish their drivers luck. And eventually it spilled over to their fast road cars. So to have it on the side of this suggests it might be something a bit special. Prices for the Quadrifoglio seem to be all over the place as far as I can tell. The most expensive I could find on Auto Trader was £92,000 for a 2024 car with 0 miles, but exactly the same spec as this one. The cheapest one I could find was actually this very car we're sitting in now, and I'll tell you how much it was at the end of the video. In terms of performance, it certainly has a bit. 512 horsepower from the 2.9 litre V6 twin turbo and 448 newton meters of torque propel the car along quite nicely, as you can imagine. With a weight of just 1,650 kilos, that gives it a power to weight ratio of 310 horsepower per tonne. Nice. In terms of miles to the gallon, it's a lot better than I was expecting, I have to say. I took it on a long journey last weekend. We did about 650 miles over 2 days, and we averaged 25 miles to the gallon, which, although, you know, if you drive a diesel Audi, that's going to sound rubbish, but compared to a lot of the cars I tend to drive, I was really surprised how good it was. And we certainly weren't hanging about either. Obviously not breaking any speed limits whatsoever, but we were giving it some. Speaking of giving it some, why don't we take it for a little drive? Let's give it some stick. My preferred settings for this car by far are putting it in race mode and manual. You'll probably not be surprised to hear me say that, but also softening up the suspension a bit. When I first drove the car, I was getting really a bit irritated with it because I was thinking, as soon as you put it in race mode, you can't put it in the softer suspension setting. However, someone with more intelligence than me pointed out actually you can. It just doesn't tell you on the dash. So I'll show you what I mean. So when you put it into race mode like this, in the middle of the dial or the switch, there's a sort of red damper light that comes on. Now if you press that once, it says medium, which means you're in medium suspension mode. If you press it again, it turns it back to stiff, but it doesn't tell you that it turns it back to stiff. You definitely feel it, but I think the issue it's kind of you're doing it instinctively by feel when you're changing it, and I wasn't actually looking at the switch, so it took a passenger to kind of point out, no, you can change it. So well done Alfa for that, because I much prefer it in the medium setting. I mean, it's miles better in the medium setting than in the stiff, and then you get to have the fun of the, you know, better throttle response, louder exhaust. I think the power's probably the same, but everything's just tightened up while not getting shaken to death. The Quadrifoglio also has fly-by-wire brakes, which sounds a little bit disconcerting, but I'm sure they know what they're doing. Do I like them? I haven't taken this car on track yet. I've got a funny feeling on track they'll be mega, but the feeling I get on the road is that there's a very slight delay when you brake, and I think the reason for that is because the car is intelligently priming the brakes. You know how when you brake, you don't just smash the pedal. Well, not if you're a bad driver, you might do that, but a good driver wouldn't just smash the brake pedal and let the car do the work. You kind of come onto the brakes a little bit softly at first, load the weight of the car over the front tyres, and then increase the braking pressure. Well, the car's doing that for you, which is a bit weird when you do it yourself, because in the first sort of few microseconds when you brake, it's like there's no braking happening here. It's not dangerous, but I'm not massively keen on the feeling on the road. As I say, I suspect on the track it might be quite good, and hopefully, fingers crossed, might be taking this car down to the Nürburgring, so stay tuned for that. There are a couple of things I really don't like about this car, primary of which is the lane departure warning, which you don't seem to be able to turn off. I've had admittedly a Porsche engineer, but a smart engineer anyway, have a look at the car, and I said, can you just turn this bloody thing off? It's really irritating. And it doesn't seem like there's actually a way of doing it. So the problem with it is, unless you're indicating, it sort of makes this noise like an old Nokia phone on silent when it goes just on cue. And I can assure you I was not drifting towards any lines there. So it does this all the time. You probably get it every 5 minutes when you're driving the car. And as I say, you can't turn it off. It seems like a really weird thing to put in a car like this, which is so much a driver's car. And people that are going to drive this car are potentially going to be people like myself who sort of instinctively take the racing line. It's not that we're trying to go fast or anything. It's just that it's so kind of innate to the way we drive. There it goes again. And yeah, it's just irritating and pointless. The other thing that I didn't like, it's a small thing, but when I picked the car up, if your phone is not already paired to the car with Bluetooth, it won't let you do it unless you're completely stationary. Even if you're doing 1 mile an hour, it won't let you pair the phone, so you have to stop, which for me is a little bit too much Benito Mussolini. But you'll be pleased to hear that those two things are really the only remnants of communism in this car. Another small inconvenience, more than an irritation, is that the wing mirror is positioned in such a place, and I think it's quite a big one as well, where it kind of blocks my view when I'm pulling up to a junction. I kind of have to move my head around like this to be able to see if there's any cars coming. Now, admittedly, as I've mentioned several times, I'm a short ass, so I'm sitting quite close to the steering wheel. It probably wouldn't be quite as bad if you were 6 foot tall and sitting further back, but for short drivers in particular, it is a little bit ill thought out maybe. The car doesn't quite have the immediate torque delivery of for example, a C63 S Mercedes. I had one of those for a while, about 6 months ago, and I always say it was the best car I've ever driven, best road car I've ever driven. This is not quite as satisfying. I'd love to have that kind of instantaneous torque that you get with a C63 S. But having said that, this is much safer, and if your missus or your mum were driving this car, you'd much prefer them to have this one. It's got bags of power at the top end, but it doesn't kind of deliver the torque all in one go like the C63 S did. Admittedly, that car was tuned as well by EST Performance, so it was kind of very savage. But I think in general, a C63 or a C63 S does have kind of more instantaneous smiles, whereas this one, kind of, you need to wind it up a little bit, and then it's got all of its punch at the top end, which is still a lot of fun, I have to say. When the car's stationary and you blip the throttle, there's no sort of major drama, there's no babies crying, you're not setting any car alarms off. Unlike with a C63 where you get a firestorm of machine guns, it's pretty sedate. But once you actually get the car rolling and then put your foot down, all hell breaks loose. Let me demonstrate. One thing that I forgot to mention before that I don't really like about the car is this gear stick. It's, how can I put it, extremely cheap and nasty. It's got like a plasticky feel to it, and on the sort of leading edge, it's very sharp, and you kind of, when you've got OCD like me, you keep kind of playing with it and touching it, a bit like, you know, when you've got an injury, when you've got, and you keep like jabbing it all the time. It's a bit like that. Not keen on that. The other thing with the gear stick is that if, like me, you drive along, when you're just cruising, you know, one hand on the gear stick, one hand on the steering wheel, when you go over a bump, you tend to sort of knock it into neutral, and then when you next accelerate, you think, why is the car not moving? But, you know, these are small points, really. One thing that is not cheap about this car is the bonnet, which is all carbon fibre, and it's lovely to look at as you're going along. A bit like with an old S-Class Mercedes, if you were lucky enough to have one, you were reminded at all times, because of the three-pointed star on the bonnet, that, you know, you were doing pretty well in life. With the Alfa, you're reminded that you're driving something a little bit special every time you look at this carbon bonnet. You can see the carbon fibre weave underneath where it's unpainted, and it sort of reminds you that you're in something a bit special and very fast. But whatever you do, don't ding the bonnet, because a new one will set you back £5,000. Another thing I really like about this car is the electric power steering. The purists amongst you may be shocked to hear me say that, and I have to say, I don't normally like cars with electric power steering, but in this it just works. It's so well sorted. And the other thing is, the car's got a really fast steering rack. So normally when you have a fast steering rack on a road car, you find yourself constantly making micro corrections as you drive along, particularly on the motorway, and it gets kind of irritating. As I said, I drove this car up north the other day and did sort of 600 miles on the motorway, and it's beautiful. It goes completely in a straight line, straight as a die, and it all just works really well. I was surprised because I had a Alfa Romeo Mito that I tested last year, and it was a reasonably nice little car. It was okay, but the driving experience was absolutely killed by the electric power steering. So thank God they got it right on this one. So for the Adam Drive score out of 10, we're going to rate it on the normal 4 things: fun, comfort, handling, and how it makes you feel. So for fun, it's a very fun car. As I say, the torque kind of kicks in a little bit later in the rev range. So for me, a C63 S is a little bit more fun, but it is a very fun car. It handles beautifully. We'll get onto that in a second. And everything about the car is just nice. It's a beautiful car. It's fun to drive. So yeah, I'd say for fun, it's got to be an 8 out of 10. In terms of comfort, it's surprisingly comfortable. This particular car, I've not mentioned this before, but someone lowered it, obviously before I bought it, and which I think is a bit of a bad move. I don't think it needs to be lowered at all unless you're taking it on circuit potentially. So it's stiffened everything up a little bit, but in general the seats are very comfortable, particularly for short journeys. I find that the bottom part of the seat's a little too hard for my liking, but the seat holds you well, it hugs you, it just feels very comfortable. You know, I'm going to give it, looking past the fact that this one's lowered, which is a stupid thing to do in my opinion, I'm going to say it's an 8.5 out of 10 for comfort. On to handling. I would say this is probably the most capable 4-door saloon I've ever driven. It really is. It's got loads of grip. The brakes are incredible. You feel part of the car at all times. I mentioned about the steering, even though it's electric power steering, you feel everything. And it's just really well balanced. The only sort of thing I would personally prefer if it had a little bit more locking in the diff, but yeah, I mean, it handles superbly. Very hard to fault. I'd say 9.5 out of 10. But the most important question of how it makes you feel, everything from the looks of the car to the fact that you can see the carbon fibre bonnet as you drive along, to the driving position, to the noise it makes when you wind it up. It's just a fantastic car. It puts a smile on your face every time you drive it. Is the smile as big as the one I had when I was driving the C63 S? Probably not quite, because I'm a hooligan, shall we say, but the car is a special car. It is a special car, and it makes you feel special. So on that basis, I have to give it a 9.5 out of 10, bringing the total to... So should you buy it, an Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio? In short, the simple answer is yes, you should. It's just a really, really nice car. You could start to get kind of a little bit more technical about the analysis and say, is it better, for example, than a Mercedes C63 S, which is similar kind of money these days? Is it better? No. Is it as good as a C63 S as a driver's car? Probably not quite. But is it as nice as a C63 S? That's another question. I would have to say it's probably a bit nicer. So we paid £19,300 for this car, which I think you could probably agree is the bargain of the century. If you'd like to see more videos like this, I'd like to make them for you. Make sure you subscribe, and if you wouldn't mind dropping a like on the video as well, it'd be much appreciated. There's that lowered suspension I was talking about. Anyway, I'm not off to the pub today. I'm gonna have a day off, but I will see you next time.